Welcome to Studio 58A Live here at the Jamaica Information Service, our discussion program coming to you live on Facebook. I'm your host, Vaughn Davis. Thank you to everyone joining us wherever you are around the world. We really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for your eyes. And like how we have your attention, do us a favor now. Share this video with a friend or two or 500 so we can have a very lively discussion. And as you watch, remember to send in your questions and your comments so we can put them to our guest. Now, no way, no better than yard. Our food, our music, our language, our Jamaicanness. It's what allows us, a dot in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, to boast an enormous global footprint. Our culture and heritage is invaluable, which means it needs to be strongly protected to ensure the country can reap the maximum benefits from it. One of the ways in which the government has sought to do so was by signing onto the Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions in 2005. Here today to tell us more about this convention and how exactly Jamaica as a country can use it to better protect our culture and heritage from exploitation is member of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO Panel of Experts on Cultural Policy and Governance, Mrs. Avril Joffee. Welcome, Ms. Joffee.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank
it's
you.
It's Joffee like coffee.
Joffee like coffee. Wow, okay, great. She's from South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, so you can pardon me for the mispronunciation, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So in terms of the convention itself, give me a little background of what it was set up to accomplish and so how is it going about doing that?
Well, the convention is a unique convention in that it really gives governments, we call them parties, who've ratified the convention.
Right.
It gives countries the sovereign right to promote and protect their own culture and their cultural content of goods, services and activities that really display, as you said earlier on, the Jamaicanness of your goods and services.
Right.
And that's a very important convention because of that. It basically says that not only that countries should do that, but they have a right to do that, and they should not be intimidated in providing policies and measures that do that by any of their trading partners. That is absolutely what the convention is. It's an international law that basically gives parties that right. The other very interesting thing about the convention is it says that it promotes participatory policy making. And it says you cannot do this alone. You as government can't do this alone. You need to work with your stakeholders, in particular your civil society, the people that represent the different disciplines of the arts, different cultural institutions, cultural organizations, community groups, youth groups, women, and all people that are vulnerable in the society, to ensure that the policies and measures that the government comes up with are really attending to the needs and the solutions and problems that are felt by the citizens of Jamaica, of a particular country. So the convention is from 2005.
Right.
We now have about 147 parties to the convention. One of those parties is the EU itself. The rest are in independent countries. And every 4 years, there's an obligation, having ratified the convention, that the country submits a report saying what is it doing to implement the convention, what is it doing in its own countries, what kind of cultural policies exist, what cultural institutions, what support mechanisms, what infrastructure is being designed, to what extent is it regionally equitable, to what extent does it attend to the needs of the youth and women. And that report is then in the public domain. So what's important about that is it's promoting transparency of information. So not only participatory policy making, but also transparent policy making and policy implementation and accountability of the ministry to the various stakeholders in the country.
All right, and so is it submitting these reports every 4 years, is that the primary requirement under the convention? Because I'm curious to find out what exactly are some of the other things that we are required to do to maintain or to stay in accordance with it beyond just the submitting the reports themselves.
Well, that's a good question, because the reporting is not a technical exercise. The reporting should be the outcome of a sustained policy dialogue with the stakeholders. So number one, the obligation of the convention is to develop both a sustained policy dialogue with the stakeholders and with other departments in the government to have interministerial committees that support the strengthening of the culture and creative sector and the cultural and the creative industry, so that, as you said earlier, people can actually earn a living from their talent, you can monetize some of the work. But it's not only about the monetary part, it's about the relationship between economic value and cultural value. So another obligation is that for global South countries is that they are recipients of international aid and foreign support to support our country's ability in the global South to strengthen our creative industries. So it's important then that the global North countries are obligated to provide preferential treatment, not only to our goods and services, but to our people, our artists, our cultural professionals, so that they can move, because the mobility of artists and cultural professionals...
That's vital. That's how they eat.
Vital.
That's how they make money.
That's how they tour. That's how they earn money, especially coming from a small island state like this, or coming from a country as far as South Africa. It's really important to access the global market and the regional markets, so that part is really the obligation, is that the global North countries need to provide greater access to people.
Okay.
So less visas that are more accessible to the artists and to cultural professionals, less restrictions on the movement of people, and so on. So those are the obligations of the global North. The global South doesn't have many obligations other than we must do the report. But in doing the report, we are developing the structured policy dialogue. We are providing transparency and accountability to our citizens and our stakeholders. And we're beginning to document and provide a benchmark from which we should be growing.
So it's almost fair to say that the more we create or we strengthen this framework surrounding our cultural and our creative, output in the country, we create this formal framework so that when other countries, US, UK, whatever countries like those, look on our artists, they will say, okay, they're coming from a country with a strong framework. So, okay, let's, give them a visa or allow them to come to where we are and, profit from their art and so on. So that's one of the benefits, if you will, of this kind of...
Yeah, I think a real benefit is the extent to which it professionalizes the sector.
Right.
It allows a
sector,
yes. And it allows a sector to also know what its rights are as individual artists, as cultural professionals, but also with the support of government. Having ratified the convention, it obligates the Jamaican government to implement policies and measures that really do support the full cultural value chain for Jamaican industries, whether they be film or media
drama,
diversity,
music,
or
performing
arts, visual arts, or looking at documenting the challenges that people have for access, who's typically owning these kind of institutions, or where is the leadership coming from? To what extent is there a gender balance in that? To what extent are the youth being accommodated in their own needs for their popular culture forms and so on? So it's about the full gamut of it. It's not really looking at heritage.
Right.
Heritage is very well served by a number of other conventions, but it obviously draws from heritage because a lot of our cultural...
that's where it comes from. That's what it originates from. Yeah.
Ritual, tradition, heritage. So we make sure that in our training program we're doing now, we have people there from the Jamaican Heritage Institute, from IOJ and so on, because those linkages have to be made.
All right, and so as people, Miss Joffee is in the island, she's conducting training and training sessions with representatives from our creative and cultural sectors, as other persons who are similar stakeholders, and helping them to appreciate, as she's been talking about the significance of maintaining and developing and maintaining this framework, this infrastructure surrounding our cultural and creative sectors, that kind of thing. So talk to me about some of the things that you have been sharing with them. What have they been, and what has the response been like? What are some of the things that you are trying to impress upon them to, pay strong attention to?
Well, I've spent most of my couple of days here, nearly 2 weeks, really trying to talk one-on-one to different organizations that support the sector, speaking a lot to the ministry and to the minister herself, which has been incredibly useful and interesting. And I really must commend the minister for being so available into this program. And even in our National Consultation Day, which we held last week, we had a very robust Q&A session where stakeholders were able to ask the minister a range of questions. And that's part of this process, which is to create a transparency about what it is people are doing, why certain people get funds and others don't, why certain programs are supported and others aren't. And obviously every country has limitations on what it can do, but it's really to ensure that so what I've learned from everybody that I've met is that there are a range of very important programs that are supporting the sector, such as a new idea for a mapping by JBDC together with the British Council. There's a lot of work happening at JAMPRO around supporting the culture and creative sector, especially through the Film Commission, but also other work with music. There's a lot of work happening by the civil society bodies such as South-South collaboration and dialogues, the kinds of film festivals that people put up, and a lot of that is very important for me to know, because it means that when we're in the 3-day training, and we've just begun it, so we've only started 3 days today, and the group we're training is a combination of government and civil society.
Right,
so it's half-half. We've got 40 people who are in attendance, and also from a range of different ministries and a lot of the different agencies of government. So the idea really is to use the training to create the kind of dialogue that begins to surface what are the good things that Jamaica's doing, what more should it be doing, what are some of the challenges that are happening. And one of the key challenges I see is about collaboration and coordination, about making sure that people share ideas and work together. For example, there's an idea for Statistics Jamaica's
Statistical Institute of Jamaica,
to develop a satellite account. In the meantime, there's a mapping study happening, and JAMPRO is doing a benchmark. Those 3 projects, for example, need to talk to one another because they're going to produce very complementary information,
so
both qualitative and quantitative. And so that sort of thing, that I don't think I'm not here to really change what Jamaica's doing.
Yeah, of course.
I'm here to help Jamaica do a kind of status quo analysis of what it is doing, and to be able to share with each other whether it's doing sufficiently enough, and whether the UNESCO Convention is offering opportunities that they're not yet taking on board. For example, there's a fund called the International Fund for Cultural Diversity, which is a fund that UNESCO has that Global North parties in particular need to submit, need to fund or help fund. But there are a lot of Global South countries that also put money into the fund, and then that fund is available for Global South. So Jamaica has an opportunity to put in 4 different projects from the ministry and from civil society that allows them to do something in particular, either to do work on a particular project, to investigate how digital media could be used for children's television, you name it. There's an array of things that could be used. And the other one is that there's an EU fund supporting UNESCO for technical assistance, and we're hoping Jamaica will put in an application to have someone. It's really a warm body. It's a person. It's not money. It's about somebody who has expertise in an area that Jamaica wants to move on. And so maybe, the ministry has an idea to develop something called Jamaica Creative, which is an interministerial committee to support the culture and creative industries. That needs to actually take off now and establish itself and do some programs and projects that could have technical assistance. Doing the mapping study or the satellite account could have technical assistance. So all of that are the kind of support that we're trying to offer from UNESCO to the Global South. But really fundamentally, it's about helping the country itself think about what are your assets, what are your key cultural assets. Jamaica, as you said, is known for its culture. It looms large in our consciousness all over the world, and especially on the continent of Africa, about a cultural space. So to what extent is that being exploited, if I can use that
that's
word?
quite- I mean,
To what extent
yeah.
is that being supported? To what extent are new entrants coming into the music sector, to the film industry, to the dance, to the to the
Right, so you
fashion,
create
to
like
the
a
visual
machinery,
arts,
so to speak, that
so
it
that it's
becomes more
vibrant.
form.
You
right,
want
yeah.
a vibrant society. You want to be able to feel that this country pulses with its culture. Yeah.
Right. I get that. One of the things that you mentioned as we were talking initially before the program started was that you mentioned it just also a while ago, is that there's a special focus on youth and women. Talk to me about why that is. What's the rationale behind that? Even though we can definitely appreciate that, but why the special focus all the same?
Well, it's a major priority for UNESCO to impact on the gender balance in everything that we do, whether it's the number of creators who are women, whether it's the people who are producing, whether it's the distributors, whether people leading organizations,
Right.
whether it's the people that we target our programs to, young women and the youth. And for the youth, our societies are predominantly youth,
That's true.
and especially in the global south.
A lot of them
Youth-
are our creators, our primary creators as well.
Well, yes, and they are going to be the bulk of our population, so they are the future. And if we don't target the youth to really think about how to become entrepreneurial with their work, how to showcase their work with greater excellence, how to access the global market, to take their work on tours or exhibit their artwork or whatever the activity is, if we don't target that part of the population, we're just talking to the people already who've done it. And that's not where we should be only speaking to. We need an intergenerational relationship, so that I know there are a lot of icons in the Jamaican society, like Miss Lou, and
yes.
so many that I've learnt about since I'm here. But what are we hearing about the younger generation? Who's coming up? Who's showing that they've got an innovative way of addressing things like dance or performing arts, or who's coming up with an interesting model for audience engagement? So those are the people we really want to...
You want people to even start thinking beyond what's existing now, just even what's going on in the future. How can we move the industry forward in different ways? That kind of thing.
And how we can, because we want a sustainable sector. We want a sector that achieves a sense of viability and vibrance and contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you think about all that I've mentioned already, you can see how it leads into the Sustainable Development Goals, because they talk about gender equality, poverty eradication, vibrant cities, cultural cities, decent work, partnerships, good institutions. And a lot of what implementing the UNESCO Convention can do is realize the objectives of the SDG goals, which is an obligation of all parts of our country, which allows us to have a dialogue now with other ministries, with local government, I don't know what you call them here, local municipalities.
Yeah, municipal corporations.
Municipal corporations, because all of them have an obligation to report on that. And through culture, they can actually realize some of those objectives.
Fantastic.
And so this convention, we are talking a lot about how it intersects with those goals.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm loving the collaboration. I'm loving the way. I mean, because this is the conversation that happens informally in a lot of bars and a lot of places all around the country. How can we take this thing that we know everybody loves, the reggae, the food, everything, and make it even more formalized so that people don't feel like it's somebody pluck them out of obscurity and give them a chance, give them a bus, as we call it in Jamaica. Make it more of a formal operation where a person who's growing up in whichever community feels like, okay, there's this machinery that I can tap into and then produce my cultural and creative output and be appreciated for it in my own right, without necessarily having to feel like I have to go and befriend whoever, you know what I mean?
Exactly. And you want people to feel that a career in the arts is something that can sustain them. That people, that there are organizations and institutions into which they can go and be interns, they can go and participate, they can go be members of associations that will support the growth of their practice, whatever their practice is. So, as I said earlier, this is not only about the commercial side of cultural industries, this is really about all activities in contemporary culture. And you want, people coming out of Edna Manley, where do they go? Where do they get hired? How do they create their own businesses? What supporting mechanisms are there for those people coming out of structured programs for the disciplines of the arts? What is there for helping people get off the ground with starting a cultural business? What kind of e-commerce,
Absolutely.
digital technologies are available on the island that support people to do distribution, to support people to create sort of repositories of music that is available to a lot of people. So there are many different projects that could be done. And really what this writing the report allows the government to actually look and say, okay, we can see we're doing a lot here, but we got nothing for, let's say, for argument's sake, children. We're not doing enough for children. What are our arts programs in the schools doing? Do we have arts programs in all the schools? Can kids at primary school and secondary school, can they take music to matric? I don't know what your final exit. It's called matric?
CXC Caribbean exam. Well, actually, CSEC rather. Showing my age
okay,
there.
So can they take music to the end of their school?
Yeah.
Can they take visual arts? Can they take drama?
CSEC, and
and can they do that in all the schools or only some schools? And what do we need to do to support those schools that don't have it?
That's true. Excellent.
Do we need an artist in school program?
Excellent.
So those are the kind of conversations, which is why we really wanted in the room, in the training, ministries of education, ministries from people from the ministries of finance, from the ministries of trade and industry, from the ministries of social development and labor, because all of that impacts on how the sector grows.
Right. Wow. Yeah. All right, so just showing some love to the persons who have joined us online. Ricardo Portius, one of our long-time watchers, really appreciate you, Ricardo. Horace Blake, Kevin Galloway, and Carleen Christie, who said she's loving the conversation, according to her. We have a question from Horace Blake. Please, let me know what that is to my technical team. All right. It sounds like Mr. Blake wants to know more. You were mentioning that there are ways for persons to access maybe even financing or funds through the EU or through different things for implementing projects related to the arts and so on. So I guess you wanted to know, more about that, if that's possible. Where can you go to get some more info?
Okay, so that's an easy question actually. There's a lot of information online. You need to Google UNESCO Creativity, and you'll get to the website of the diversity of cultural expressions. That's the easiest way to get to it. UNESCO the Creativity, and then you need to look for one of the drop-down menus called the IFCD, which is the International Fund for Cultural Diversity. Anybody can apply. It needs to be it needs to be a well thought out project. The maximum amount of the grant is $100,000 US. Jamaica is eligible for submitting at least 4, but anybody can submit. They go directly to UNESCO office. Then those are then sent back to the ministry, and they need to choose 1 or 2 out of those projects. Right. So the project should be something in line with the convention. Anything to support the creation, production, distribution, or dissemination or enjoyment of cultural expressions. Basically is in the field, the scope.
Can you repeat the website?
It's I would just Google culture. I would Google UNESCO Creativity, because that gives you direct access to the UNESCO division around the diversity of cultural expressions.
All right. So hopefully that helps you, Horace. Hopefully you can come up with a fantastic project that you can use to help push forward and advance the state of the culture and as a whole. You know what I mean? Helping to move forward the whole industry so that other persons can appreciate it. Now, in terms of the reports itself, I don't know if we maybe repeating ourselves, but let me ask us all the same. In terms of what are some of the things that the reports will look at specifically in terms of, for example, will it show that the country generated X amount to our GDP from culture, and breaks it down into other little subcategories, things like that? What would it be looking at?
So the report is structured against the 4 goals of the convention. The first goal is to support sustainable systems of governance for culture. Under that, there are 4 key areas that we want to ask countries to report on. Firstly, do you have a cultural policy? And what does it talk about? Do you have cultural measures? What are those measures? Those measures could be anything to do with, for example, a measure to support film making on on the island. It could be about supporting a touring space for musicians. So policies and measures to do with cultural expressions generally. Then there's another area that we need to report on, which is the ways in which in the value chain the digital technologies are impacting and are being supported by government or other agencies for organizations to take on board digital platforms, to be able to use digital technologies to do distribution, to do creation of content, to do productions. To what extent are those in place? So it's all around digital, but across the value chain. To what extent, and then there's one around media diversity. To what extent do we have a vibrant media landscape in Jamaica? Radio stations, community radio, commercial broadcasters, state public broadcasters. To what extent is there freedom of the media? To what extent, what are the policies supporting that? Are there content quotas? Does a radio station, for example, have a quota of how much local music you should be playing? And do you have co-production agreements? So the media diversity and the landscape of that is another very clear area around broadcasting and so on. And regulations around broadcasting and licensing and who gets access to licensing. And also demographics, who owns the licensing and, women's role in that and the youth and so on. And then the final area of the first goal is around the involvement of civil society. How does government ensure that civil society can participate in its policies, in the implementation of its policies, and in the monitoring and evaluation of its policies? So those are part of goal 1. Then it needs to report on the second goal, which is achieving a balance in the flow of goods, services, and activities, and the mobility of artists and cultural professionals. So there it needs to talk about to what extent can Jamaicans easily access other markets in your trading areas or in the areas that Jamaican artists want to go to. What are the restrictions on those visas? To what extent is the government working with other governments to ease those restrictions for artists? To what extent are you bringing in a lot of foreign artists, and what is their role here, and how easy it is for artists coming in to have residencies here and so on? So that's all about mobility. And then the flow of goods and services might require some more data, some quantitative data. To what extent are we exporting our products and services? To which countries are we exporting? From which countries do we mainly import cultural products and goods and services? And then also there's a third part of that, which is around treaties and agreements. To what extent is Jamaica part of a set of treaties like in CARICOM that support the culture and creative industries? To what extent is it in conventions and agreements that Jamaica's party to?
That'll be able to expand the reach of the culture and so on, right?
Goal 2. Then goal 3 is to integrate culture into sustainable development. So there we need to report on to what extent is culture present in our development goals, in our national development plans, in our development strategies. To what extent and what part of culture is it? Is it culture as in heritage? Is it cultural expression? Is it the full range identified by the diversity of cultural expressions? Is it about contemporary culture and the importance of cultural life of communities? So it's about looking at and doing a stock take
really
of that.
Comprehensive, essentially.
Very comprehensive. And then it's looking at internationally. To what extent are international relations on development, including culture and cultural expressions? And then the final goal is promoting fundamental freedoms. So we have 2 aspects we report on there. One is around gender equality, as we've discussed already, and the one is around freedom of expression. So for a lot of countries, freedom of expression is an issue. There's a huge
People
clampdown.
regulate what they're able to say and so on. Do
Exactly,
and
I think in Jamaica it's a pretty open and free society.
Essentially pretty open,
but it needs to be documented. Where are the problems? Where are the constraints? Where is it that musicians or artists or visual artists or performing artists feel they cannot speak up? And how should government be responding to that? What is government already put in place to ensure that freedom is guaranteed in law? So that's
it's
what we
really
report on.
I
Four
can,
big goals.
Yeah,
and then
it sounds
sub
like a lot,
areas
to
of
be honest.
monitoring.
So
Yes.
I can understand why there might be some challenges in making sure that they're completed properly and effectively, so we can have an accurate look at what the industry looks like and the ways in which the different initiatives being undertaken to expand it and make sure that it is reaping its full potential.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So it seems to me like those who are in your workshops are really in for some really good food for thought. I think they're
and a lot of hard work, because a lot of the information is coming from them, and my role there is to facilitate a conversation. It's not to do a lot of dumping of information. It's more about making sure that the scope of the convention is well understood, and then the participants are chosen because they already know their areas incredibly well and can begin to articulate, actually we've got this program going on which will support this idea in the convention, because we recognize that not many countries have actually used the convention to inspire their programs, but the programs are aligned to the convention. So we're looking at people beginning to start writing and thinking about the convention to see to what extent it can inspire new programs.
It's more like a guide as opposed to like a binding kind of contractual kind of vibe. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, so as we bring things down, let's go and give the last word to you in terms of letting persons understand the value and the significance of the convention itself, and the value of making sure, as you said, to use it as inspiration to grow our own artistic expressions and output.
Well, I think this is a wonderful time for Jamaica to be thinking about this, because it starts a process that then hopefully will be continued without my presence here, because we start having a dialogue between the various agencies and the people involved in the sector, deeply involved in the sector, who really are all trying to work on individual projects that actually make a huge contribution. And that contribution is about not just value add to the GDP. That's not the only contribution we worry about. It's really about to the cultural life of the community and to the vibrancy of our cities, of our various parishes in Jamaica. To what extent is there, it will hopefully stimulate a more equitable distribution of cultural activities and resourcing across the island, and also ensure that a city like Jamaica, which already has been inscribed as a UNESCO creative city, actually is able to honor that inscription by having spaces, especially public spaces, cultural infrastructure, theatres, galleries, hub spaces for people to congregate, to discuss their ideas, spaces for small business creation. All of that contributes to that viability of being a creative city.
All right. So where can persons get more information about the convention itself? And I suppose if they wanted to get in contact with you to just shoot some ideas, how can they do so? Okay.
So the website I mentioned is a very full website with wonderful tools on it. And that's called, as I said, to Google culture, creativity and UNESCO together, and you'll then come up with the right website. Or you can just put unesco.org/creativity and you'll get to that. And then there's an area there that's very interesting that I think the public should know about, which is an area called under a drop-down menu called Tools. There's a policy monitoring tool there, which allows you to put in the area you're interested in, let's say film, and to say, I'm interested in Latin American, Caribbean. I'm interested in what countries are doing to stimulate film, to give ideas about the kind of projects you think might work in this country. Or you could put in visual arts, or you could simply put in digital, or civil society. So if you're thinking about doing an IFCD project, look at what other projects have done to get ideas and so on. And that's a very useful tool, because it makes all the QPRs that have been submitted, they're called QPRs because they're quadrennial periodic reports. All of them are located on this policy monitoring platform, which is there to ensure that everybody in the sector, all the stakeholders, have the same access to information.
All right, lovely. And you want to give like a personal email address or email?
Oh, yes, sure. So personal email address is avriljoffee@gmail.com. It's Avril, AVRIL, @gmail.com. I'll be happy to respond to queries and questions. And just to say that I really think Jamaica's on the right track.
All right.
And I look forward to the QPR report.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. There's lots of information. There's lots of support out there for creators, public and private sector personalities who are out there trying to move the artistic sector forward, move our cultural expressions forward so that we can have a much more active and vibrant framework, vibrant sector that we can, as they say, the rising tide lifts all ships. So the more we move, the more we make a stronger case for ourselves as a strong cultural and creative country, the more we'll benefit. And she mentioned it, our artists will be able to travel better, other countries will look upon us more favorably and allowing us to enter and practice our art, expressing ourselves, sharing our culture with them. So there's lots to gain for allowing yourselves to get informed on this issue, the Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. Get informed, understand it. If necessary, you can make a link with Ms. Joffee and get some more understanding so we can all put together and raise the collective value of Jamaica's creative output. Right? With that said, it's time for us to wrap. Thank you to everyone who tuned into our discussion, especially those of you who sent in your questions and your comments. And if you have a question and we didn't get to answer it, not to worry. You can send it in all the same and we'll go through afterwards and see if we can provide you with the correct information. Remember, our audience plays a major part in our show. So if there's anyone you'd like for us to have in studio, let us know. And we'll try as best as possible to have that person in studio to answer all your questions. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Jamaica Information Service to see who will be in studio next. We do this every we do this mostly on Thursdays, but we made a special accommodation for Miss Joffee here. Right? So I've been your host, Vaughn Davis, and this has been Studio 58A Live. Thank you again for joining us, and please have a wonderful day.